Good morning, everyone. Hello, and thank you for being with us today. I'm Buffy Hamilton, School Librarian at Creekview High School in Canton, Georgia, and it's my pleasure to welcome you and introduce our speakers this morning. Please bear with me as I share some important housekeeping information with you today. This is the fourth installment in the exciting new Grassroots Georgia Wednesday webinar series. This series is a collaboration between the Georgia Public Library Service, otherwise known as the State Library of Georgia, and the Georgia Library Association. While the series is designed to highlight trends, innovation, and best practices in Georgia's academic, public, and school libraries, it's also proving to be a fantastic way to showcase our movers and shakers who work in Georgia's libraries. We're really jazzed about the initial success of this series and the positive response to the webinars. I'd like to take just a moment to thank my partners in crime, Sarah Steiner of Georgia State University and Pat Carterette of the Georgia Public Library Service. This series would never have gotten off the ground without their energy, enthusiasm, and can-do attitude. Sarah will be behind the scenes today taking care of the webinar technical issues, and Pat will be monitoring your questions and comments in the text chat area. We're using the Illuminate web conferencing software tool for this series, and so far everything has worked very smoothly for us. The microphone and whiteboard tools have been disabled today for participants. Please use the text chat area to ask questions and to post comments. If you don't hear the audio, try logging in and logging out again. Use the little plug icon in the lower left corner of your screen to log in and out. You can also try the audio setup wizard under Tools at the top of your Illuminate window. Many participants want or need attendance certificates. We've made it easy for you to get one. Within 3 hours of the conclusion of today's 2 webinars, participants who registered and provided a valid email address will receive an email message from us with the instructions for obtaining a certificate. Additional important information will be in this email as well. Please note that some registration confirmation emails did bounce back to us because of possible typos or errors in the email addresses. If you do not receive an email later today, please contact us at georgiawws@gmail.com, and then we will send that information directly to you. Want to go back and listen to today's webinars again? We record all the Wednesday webinars and house them in one convenient place on the Georgia Public Library Service website. The URL will be on our screen, but it will also be sent to you in the email that I just referred to. One more thing for all you Twitter fans, the hashtag for today's session is GWWS. Any tweets that you send out from today's sessions, please include that hashtag for us. We're going to take just a moment to look at the participant interface. Again, we have our whiteboard window that we'll be primarily working out of today, your participant window, the chat window, and then you'll see that your audio is disabled at this time. Again, if you're having any audio difficulty, directly beneath the microphone in the lower left-hand corner, you can use the plug icon to log in and out of the webinar if you are having difficulties. At the bottom of the participant area, in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see options for raising your hand, using emoticons to show your pleasure or displeasure in a polling area. Depending on the presentation, the polling area might have a green check mark and a red X, or as in today's case, an A, B, C, and additional letters for multiple choice questions. There's also a stepping away icon, but we really don't need to know if you need to temporarily step away. We have roughly 60 people signed up for today's webinars, and we are very excited about you all joining us. I'd like now to introduce today's special guest. Trudi Green is the Information Services Team Leader at the Athens Clark County Library, a department which includes Adult Reference, Programming Readers Advisory, and the Heritage Room. Prior to joining ACCL in 2006, she served as Adult Services Supervisor at the Leon County Public Library in Tallahassee, Florida. She is also a graduate of the inaugural Pinnacle class sponsored by GPLS. Being smart about money, credit, and savings has become a major focus of her life since attending a Money Matters class taught by Teri. Hanna has taught business education classes at Valdosta Technical College as well as Thompson High School in McDuffie County. She also was an investment services representative for SunTrust Bank, where she presented financial skills seminars to clients and community organizations. While Trudi and Teri are adjusting their microphones, we're going to take just a moment to look at the question on the next screen. Now that you know how to use the polling feature, we'd like for you to make your most educated guess and select your answer to the question. They're going to tell us in just a moment the actual answer. Remember that your polling options are beneath the participant screen, and you can choose the letter A, B, C, D, E for your most educated guess. If you have any questions or comments throughout today's webinar, please type them into the chat area. Trudi and Teri will address your questions and comments at the conclusion of today's program. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our guests, Trudi and Teri. Thank you.
Thanks, Bethany, and this is Trudi Green here, and you can see our question on the board, which is what percentage of Americans carry credit card balances up to $10,000? This is actually a question that Teri uses in her classes. And I'm going to go ahead and close polling, and the answer is B, which is 33%. So let's see, I didn't see how many answered it right, maybe about 45 people. I'm sorry, some of my things disappeared and I don't see how to advance it. Buffy, if you're there, half my screen has disappeared and I don't know how to advance the slides. There it goes. Okay, I don't know what happened. Thank you. Sorry about that. All right, let's get started with that. Money Matters Because Your Future Matters is a $94,510 grant that the Athens Clarke County Library received in 2009 from ALA and FINRA, which is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority Investor Education Foundation. The library was one of 13 to receive one of their grants that year as part of the Smart Investing at Your Library grant program. One of the goals of our grant is just targeting students working towards their GED with classes in financial literacy. The classes, among other things, cover making a budget, monitoring credit reports and credit scores, choosing a banking account, and, of course, a lot more. We've been offering the classes since October 2009, so just a year, as a matter of fact. We've had 206 students enroll in at least one class, and 78 of them have completed all 6, which is a 38% completion rate, which is about what we expect with people working towards their GED, that it's really difficult sometimes for them to work in everything that they need to work. We're completing a one-year evaluation, a 12-month evaluation, to see how many students have completed their GED, and then we'll have some more numbers to see where those students are going. Now, as we're working through today's presentation, we are using the term financial literacy, and I think it's important to take a moment to think about what do we really mean by financial literacy and why it's important. At its most basic, financial literacy is defined as the ability to understand finance. But, of course, nothing is really that simple, and there's lots of definitions and lots of buzzwords and that sort of thing. And in doing my research, I found one definition that I really liked, and it's from the Institute of Socio-Financial Studies, and I'm going to read this to you. It's a little bit long. Personal financial literacy is the ability to read, analyze, manage, and write about the personal financial conditions that affect material well-being. It includes the ability to discern financial choices, discuss money and financial issues without or despite discomfort, plan for the future, and respond competently to life events that affect everyday financial decisions, including events in the general economy. And that's not near as pithy as ability to understand finance, but it does bring in a lot of really good points, I think, with the ability to actually analyze your financial conditions, manage it. I especially like the point where it says to discuss issues without or despite discomfort, which I think many of us have probably had those uncomfortable financial discussions. And it also brings into it the important part of knowing about the general economy, which we certainly can see in today's economy. Well, there's even an official U.S. government definition. The President's Advisory Council on Financial Literacy, in their 2008 report to the President, defined financial literacy as the ability to use knowledge and skills to manage financial resources effectively for a lifetime of financial well-being. So, no matter how you define personal finance, it's really important to have it, but guess what? As Americans, we really don't. FINRA, which is the agency that gave us the grant, they did a survey in 2009 where they surveyed 1,500 people in the Financial Capability in the United States report, found that nearly half of the respondents had difficulty paying monthly expenses. So just paying their mortgage, paying their rent, utility bills, half the people are just having trouble doing that. The majority of the respondents don't have a rainy day fund, so they don't have money set aside for unexpected expenses such as a car repair, maybe even a layoff or an illness. They also don't have money set aside for predictable life events such as their child's college education or their own retirement. More than 1 in 5 of the respondents use non-bank alternatives such as taking a payday loan, going to a pawn shop, or taking advances on their income tax returns. And while over half of them claimed that their own financial knowledge was good, or very good, good to very good, nevertheless they're engaging in financial behaviors that generated fees and expenses, such as paying a credit card late and in getting that late fee, other expenses like taking those payday loans and the expenses associated with that. They're not comparing financial interest rates on products. So instead of shopping around for a car loan, they may be taking what the dealer gives. They're not comparing rates on their credit cards or mortgages. And they exhibited a marked inability to do basic interest calculations. And now it's time for another Money Matters quiz, speaking of credit cards, which is what percentage of Americans pay their credit card balance in full each month? I'm going to take a minute to... And if someone could do the poll results, there we go. Okay, well, the answer is C, which is 54% of people are paying their credit card balance in full each month. It looks like we had D as the biggest answer, 13%. So a lot of people are doing it right. Well, here in Georgia, and I imagine not everyone with us is from Georgia, but we're not so good. We're ranked 3rd in bankruptcies. This was in April 2010. They released that data. In 2009, the FDIC did a survey, and they found that 12% of Georgians are what they called unbanked, which is, again, using non-bank alternatives such as fee-based debit cards, paying cash for transactions. We don't have the payday loans here in Georgia, but we do have title loans, so they're using those in pawn shops. The national average for the unbanked is 8%, so unfortunately we're higher than that. Interestingly, 45% of those that are unbanked don't have a high school diploma, which is the population that Teri is dealing with. Okay, we're offering the financial literacy classes here through the library, and I think it's also important to think about, is the library the proper place for this sort of education? Well, in 2009, IMLS released a report called Museums, Libraries, and 21st Century Skills. This initiative underscores the role that museums and libraries play in helping citizens build their 21st century skills. And you can look at the report, and I see they're posting the links to it. There was a link to it on the GPLS page about this webinar. And it's really interesting, and they highlight some libraries that are doing exceptional jobs of teaching their citizens 21st century skills. There's a self-assessment you can do for your library. But in this report, they do identify some themes, and financial literacy was one of their themes, in addition to financial literacy, health literacy, and global awareness. And libraries are, of course, a logical place for citizens to come to for this type of information. We're trusted institutions. We provide comfortable learning environments. We provide unbiased information. And, of course, we have very helpful staff. So if your citizens are already used to coming to the library for a computer class, talking to your reference librarians, maybe even asking sensitive questions to the librarians, then it does make sense that the library is a good place to come to for this type of information. As we mentioned before, our grant is funded by FINRA and ALA RUSA. They were started in 2007. This is just some information from their website. The groups have collaborated to help build the capacity of public libraries to provide effective, unbiased financial and investor education. This grant program supports public libraries in their efforts to meet financial investor education needs at the community level by providing high-quality resources and services. They've awarded about $3.2 million in grants to libraries and library networks since 2007. You may be wondering how you can get one of these nifty grants, and the application is by invitation only. However, if you go to their website at smartinvesting.ala.org, you can actually send off for information about how you can see about getting an invitation for the grant. And while you're on their website, you can take a minute to look at what the other libraries are doing, and it's very exciting to see how they are serving their populations. Some are working with just investing in general. They may be working with their immigrant populations and other non-English speakers, the elderly, women, teen. It's just, all across the board, and it's really exciting. And as far as I can tell, we're the only grant that is working specifically with targeting people working towards their GED. Our program is called Money Matters, and we offer some community programs that Teri will tell you about. But the main part of our program is to offer the 6 hours of basic financial instruction to students working towards their GED. The people who graduate can qualify for a scholarship from our grant partner, which is the Athens Clark Literacy Council. So why the GED population? Why in Athens did we feel like this was the population we wanted to work with? Let me tell you something about Athens. Athens is known really as a great place to live. It's home to the University of Georgia. It's got a vibrant music scene in the great downtown. It's close to Atlanta, but not too close to Atlanta. We're consistently rated among the best as a place to retire. As a college town, we were just ranked number 2 as a college town. In 2009, Kiplinger's ranked Athens as number 5 among its best cities. But there's the other side. Athens, Clark County, has a poverty rate where population is about 113,000. where our poverty rate is one of the highest in the nation at close to 30%. Only about 65% of our students are graduating from high school. That number does tend to fluctuate, but it's always high, and it's always higher than national averages. We have about 10,000 people in the community who don't have a high school diploma or a GED, so there's a lot of people who just don't have education at all. And we have a high unemployment rate, as does Georgia, as does the country. Our employment rate hovers at about the 10% mark. Unfortunately, just a few weeks ago, another employer announced it was closing, and with it 111 jobs. So in many ways there's two Athens. There's the Athens that's associated with the university and the professors and the high living, that sort of thing. And then we have the people who can't afford houses and can't find a job and are in that 30% poverty. And speaking of poverty, here's another Money Matters quiz. Again, this is something that Teri goes over in her classes, which is true of millionaires. Pick A, B, C, D, or E. Well, the answer is E. It's actually all of the above, which we think is interesting that the most popular car is the Ford. Okay, so let's get back to our grant. The poverty in Athens is a real problem, and the community realized this, and several years ago started a task force that they called Partners for a Prosperous Athens. It's a community-wide forum, and it brought in lots of leaders from the community. And they met, and they did all these studies and reports. And at the end, they did a report. And among the goals and recommendations, education was a key goal. Well, because if your workforce is better educated, then you're more attractive to industry and businesses. You're going to bring in more jobs. They're going to pay your workers better, and that's going to bring them out of poverty. So bringing up our education attainment level for the community is an important step in getting us out of this 30% poverty level. Just the benefits of earning a GED are well documented. People who have their GED or high school diploma will earn an average of $12,000 more a year than people who don't. So not even going to college, they'll actually earn about $12,000 more a year just by getting a GED or graduating high school. And of course, with that diploma comes better job opportunities. The jobs are going to be better paying, and with that comes the financial security. So, I'm going to tie this all back into the grant in just a second. The grant idea came from a member of our library board who is a local banker and is also on the Athens Clark Literacy Council, which had some money raised for GED scholarships. The GED costs $95 to take the entire exam here in Georgia, which is a lot of money to most people, but for people without a job, it's a huge barrier. So the scholarships are really important to encourage people to go ahead and complete the GED and take that exam. So the Literacy Council wanted to encourage that and to partner with the library with the financial literacy classes to give them a means for offering the scholarship. So here it is. People would take the Money Matters classes, the series of 6 classes, and they'll learn all about managing their money well, the credit scores, finding a good bank, and when they complete all 6 classes, they can apply to get the scholarship. Then they'll take the exam. Hopefully they will pass all parts of the GED. Then hopefully they'll be able to get a good job, and they'll earn some money, better money than they've ever made, hopefully, and they will manage that money better because of the Money Matters classes. And there it is, all put together for you. So in December of 2009, actually, is when we found out we won. We didn't start until 2009, though. And the grant, which is, again, about $95,000, a little bit less, covers Teri's salary to teach the classes and develop the materials. We're able to purchase library materials with it, which is a huge help right now. So we're able to purchase books on investment and just managing your money, that sort of thing. We're able to publicize and do some printing. We had some nifty little bus ads a while ago. Another thing that we can purchase is Learning Express database, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a testing database, which does offer GED practice tests on it, which is really helpful, and lots of other things too. So we really like Learning Express a lot. Okay, Teri and I are going to switch places now, and she's going to give a little bit of a credit class, and while we're doing that, you may take another Money Matters quiz.
So all of our questions, or our question today, is about all consumers are legally entitled to receive free of which of the following? Okay, great. The answer B. So y'all know that you can go out there and get your free credit report. And if you're in the state of Georgia also offers 3 additional reports per year. So that would allow you to get your free credit report from each of the reporting agencies once free on a national basis. But in the state of Georgia, you can get that additional copy. And it's a great way to see if there's any identity fraud. You can pay for that, but obviously getting a free credit report is an excellent way to keep on top of that and to know where you stand at all times. One of the biggest problems with credit reports is errors on credit reports. So if you're not getting it, you could be in a position, as my physician was. He got ready to close on a house, and they pulled his credit report, and there were errors. Well, errors are not easily corrected on credit reports, and certainly not in a 30-day time frame. So he ended up paying a higher interest rate on his house just because he hadn't checked that credit report prior to that and taken care of those errors. So, very important thing. So my name is Teri Hanna, and I am the financial educator, and welcome this morning. I'm glad you're joining us. I noticed some comments regarding some of our questions. I think it's a lot of fun to really look at those and to see what the answers are, especially like the millionaires questions. Unfortunately, our society has given us the idea of how millionaires live, but in many cases, millionaires did not inherit their money. It's from people who are making good, sound financial decisions who've gotten into that position. And so they are choosing to drive cars like 9% of that population drives a Ford. The second most favored car is a Cadillac. So they're still staying in those lower end cost cars. So I think it's a lot of fun to look at those. What I'd like to talk about today for a few minutes, just to give you a taste of what one of our classes is like, is to talk about the Credit Card Act of 2009. The Act was signed in May of 2009, and it's been phased in over the last 15 months. The first provisions began in 2009 in August, and the last provisions went into effect just last month. The goal of the Act was to provide more transparency to consumers, as well as to make the terms of the credit easier to understand. And frankly, we could all use that. This was achieved through enhanced consumer disclosures. There are more rules now governing consumer protection, and there are provisions to protect our young consumers. So let's look at a few of the provisions of the Act. Certainly, I'm not going to go over every piece of it, but I wanted to give you a few ideas of things that will affect each one of us. Under the consumer protection provisions, interest rate increases are limited to certain situations. Interest rates cannot be increased within the first 12 months of opening a new account. And if a promotional rate is offered, it must stay in effect for at least the first 6 months. Now, what happens to most of us, we've already got credit cards, and we're concerned about those retroactive interest rate hikes that will not only cover our future purchases, but also our existing balances. Those are banned except in 3 cases. So listen up. First, if you do have an introductory rate and it ends, well, of course, then that is retroactive and it will go back to your existing balances. Second, if your credit card is based on an index and it's variable, then your interest rate will be changing as the index changes. And third, the one that we can all avoid, is making sure that we're never 60 days late on a payment. That will cause us to have an interest rate increase. But there are some protections for those of us who may get in that situation. If the card issuer does give us a rate increase, they must restore our interest rate to the previous level after 6 months if the cardholder makes on-time payments during that 6-month period. That is a really important part, because if you've ever had that happen to you, used to if you were 1 day late, you would have an interest rate increase. So now people who are dealing with job losses or financial problems, if they do get into a situation, they know if they can get back on track, within 6 months that's going to be reevaluated and their interest rate can be restored. So I think that's a great part of this. Another is a practice in the credit card industry that was known as universal default. This is no longer allowed. And what this practice was if you had a utility bill or another credit card that you paid late, that would impact all your other credit. So if you made one late payment, you could have an interest rate increase across the board. So certainly that did not benefit anyone. So this practice has been banned. So now if you do pay your light bill late, it's not going to impact your Visa card. Another part of the act was the right to opt out. So what if your credit card issuer changes the terms of your credit? This provision now allows you to, with 45 days advance notice prior to any changes in your credit card, they're going to let you know if anything changes. It can also include your benefits as well as your reward structure of your credit card. You have the right to opt out or reject certain changes in the terms of your account. Opting out means that the credit card holder agrees to close their account and pay off the balance under the old terms. They have at least 5 years to pay off the balance. So this may be a good option if suddenly the terms of your credit card change and you don't want to be stuck with that higher interest rate or with some terms that are not favorable to you. But it's always important to understand that when you close a credit card account, that you may lower your credit score as well. So you need to understand all the ramifications before you do take one of those opt-out options. The third thing is what happens when you go over your limit. In the past, if someone used their credit card and went over the limit, knowingly or unknowingly exceeded it, certainly they would be hit with large fees, rate increases, and lowered credit scores. Now consumers have an option to, they must opt in if they want a credit card to be approved for over the limit. So those who opt out would have their transactions rejected if they exceeded their credit limits. Thus, they would avoid the over-limit fees. If you opt in, the fees can't, however, exceed the amount of the overspending. So let's say you used your credit card to buy a new sofa, but you only went over your credit limit for about $20. Well, the fee cannot exceed $20. So this gives you some control over your credit card. And certainly if you've got joint account holders out there, such as college-age kids that are using your card, you may want to have that card denied if they're going over the limit to save some issues. This going over the limit problem is not just with credit cards. We find this to be a huge problem with debit cards. Most of us are out there using our debit cards pretty frequently, but I found that my student population was using them pretty much as their only means of payment. And what was happening is many times they would go over the limit on their debit cards. And when that happened, they would get hit with the overdraft fees and then the balances as well. So for many of them, their financial troubles are beginning with that being approved. Fortunately, many of the banks are now following the same opt-in practice. So now you have to opt in order for your debit card to be approved for an over-the-limit purchase. So just be aware of that and see how your debit card has been affected. Lastly, I want to talk about subprime credit cards. Subprime credit cards are for people who have had bad credit. People who get the subprime credit cards often are charged account opening fees. And many of those fees can be almost as much as the account credit limit. So that's a real problem. They get a credit card, they're trying to go out there and reestablish themselves, yet their whole credit limit has been taken up by fees. This provision requires that the fees cannot exceed 25% of the available credit limit. The downside is many card issuers will now limit the fees up front. However, they will charge much higher interest rates on these accounts. And the provision does not cap how high an interest rate can go. So part of it's positive for those folks and part of it can be negative. Now let's look at the protection of our young consumers. Living in a college town, we find that we have students who come into our classes who are already significantly in credit card debt. Many of them are 20 years old. They've been in college 1 or 2 years, and they're already trying to figure out how they're going to get out of debt. Under the new provision, credit cards cannot be issued to people who are under the age of 21 unless they have an adult cosigner or, imagine this, they can prove that they can repay the debt. So that is a significant change in the credit card laws. college students would also have to have permission from their parents in order to increase the credit limits on joint accounts. Now, my parents gave me a credit card when I went to college, and I remember it had a $300 limit. And had I done anything to change that, I wouldn't have had the card any longer. So we didn't need President Obama to stop that for me, but obviously that does happen to many parents who have joint accounts with their college-age kids. In addition, students or people who are under 21 would have to opt in to get pre-screened credit card offers. And lastly, credit card companies have been banned from college campuses. They must now stay 1,000 feet from the campus if they're going to do any kind of giveaways, such as T-shirts, free pizza, koozies, anything like that that used to encourage students to sign up. The last part is enhanced consumer disclosures. And frankly, I think this is one of the best components of this provision. Specifically, it deals with minimum payments. Credit card issuers must now disclose to credit holders the consequences of making only a minimum payment each month. I think we were all surprised when we learned that 54% of the people out there were paying their credit cards off every month. I'd like to say I was always in that 54%, but I'm not. But certainly, you know, having these minimum payments disclosed and people understanding how long it can truly take them to pay off their debt is a big bonus. So let's take a look at the new statement style. I apologize, this isn't the clearest slide, but let's just kind of walk through it. If you're like some people, if you just peek into your credit card statement and you don't actually open it up and look at it, you may not realize that this is part of your credit card statement now. But this is the way the new disclosures look. You'll see your balance. You'll see the current minimum payment required. It'll clearly detail what the fee would be if you did not make your payment. It shows how many years it's going to take you to pay off this debt. Now, most of us thinking, oh, I have $2,000 on my credit card, no big deal. If you only make that $70 payment each month, it will take a whopping 17 years to pay off that debt. And you will have paid $6,000. So over $4,000 more just because you were making the minimum payment. But fortunately, the disclosures include how long it will take you or how much you have to pay if you want to do it in 3 years. So here's the difference. If you make an $83 payment every month versus a $70 payment, so only $13 more, that debt will be paid off in 3 years. You will have paid $3,000 total, saving yourself over $3,000 in interest. So this is excellent for those people who are new to credit cards, or frankly, I'm not new to credit cards, but I need this put in front of me every month just to encourage me to add that extra little bit if I'm not making a full payoff. The reason it takes so long is, let's look over here at this interest charge. If you're making a $70 payment, if $51 of it is going to interest, you're only actually paying $18.50 or so towards the balance. So this is a great new thing that's been added. Also, I wanted to let you all know about a link. Most of this information came from creditcards.com. So if you want to take a look at that website, they can give you more detailed disclosure on this law. So if you have some specific questions later today, you know, feel free to head off to that website. So with any time you have a law, there's always some great things that take place, but there's also some negatives. Sometimes those negatives are foreseen by the credit card issuers in the market, and sometimes there are unforeseen things that happen. So let's take a look at some of the things of how this new credit card law may impact you. Number one, we may begin to see higher upfront cost. Some of those changes that you may see in your credit card are higher upfront costs in the way of annual fees. For a long time, we had done away with annual fees. Most cards do not have them. Well, you're going to see them come back and come back big. So this may be a time when you get an annual fee added to your account, you may decide you want to opt out of that situation. But just be aware that you're going to start seeing more annual fees. I just read in a Morningstar article this week that said that credit card interest rates have steadily increased. The current average rate on credit cards is 14.7%, and it's the highest it's been in 9 years. So not only are we going to see more fees added to our credit card accounts, but the interest rates that we'll be paying will also be higher. Now, one of the things they expected to happen were fewer reward cards. Well, that hasn't panned out. There are not fewer reward cards, yet the provisions and the restrictions on the rewards have gotten much tighter. And there are also many more fees attached to reward cards. So if you're using a reward card to get points for miles or trips or whatever, just be very, very aware of those, the penalties and the restrictions that go along with it. The next thing is we're probably going to see some shorter grace periods. And the grace period has to do with from the time you purchase an item, at what point does interest start accumulating? Many of us believe that if we charge something this month and pay it off when the bill's due, that no interest will be accumulated. And if your card is established that way, then that will be true. But many credit card companies will begin to shorten those grace periods. It can go from anywhere to immediately when you charge something, you will begin to accrue interest. Could be a couple days, 5 days, 10 days, 12 days. Every credit card can be different. So it's real important to read that fine print on your credit card and know that if you're thinking, well, I just want to get the points, but I'm going to pay it off, make sure that you're not accumulating any interest during that time period. The next thing that can happen as a provision of this law is we can have account closures and credit limit reductions. Now, this began immediately after the credit card law was signed into effect. Credit card companies started looking at their accounts, and people who had not used their accounts actively suddenly got notices that their accounts were being closed. Many customers also got credit limit reductions. This happened to my mother. She called me one day and she goes, I don't know what's wrong. They just, dropped my credit limit on this card. She'd always paid on time, no problems, but it was just a way for the credit industry to contract, to reduce their risk, and part of this provision required no advance notice. Another thing is as they closed more accounts, then they were able to offer new accounts with some of these newer fees. So if that happened to you, certainly that was really part of what happened as an unforeseen part of this act. Please note that there are no caps on how high interest rates can go, and we do feel like that because of some of the restrictions that we'll see less accessibility for our low-income consumers as well as those who have bad credit. And I thought it would be fun to look at the factors that impact your credit score real quick. This is probably one of the most meaningful things that we do in our classes. People are very surprised when they understand how their credit score is determined. The company that established credit scores is called FICO, the Fair Isaac Corporation, and it's really the gold standard of credit card scores. 80% of banks and lenders use that score, and it's something you could go online and purchase for $15. There are many other scores that are being made available out there. Your credit card company may make available a score to you that's free, but understand that that's not the FICO score. The FICO score you do have to purchase. But let's just look at these factors and how this provision might impact us. 35% of your score is based on on-time payments. So the best way to increase your credit score is to make sure that you never have a late payment. The next component is 30%. It's the capacity of the credit card limit. How much capacity are you using? And this is the one that's a little trickier. Credit card companies give you a credit limit. Let's say you have a Visa card and you have a $1,000 limit, and you have $800 on that credit card currently. You are using 80% of your current capacity on that credit card. So the credit scoring companies are going to look at each individual card and determine what percentage of your credit limit you're using, but they're also going to look at your total consumption. So if you have 10 credit cards, they're going to total up all your credit limits, and they're going to total up all your balances and determine what percentage capacity you're using. So to have the best score, you need to keep that number at below 30% capacity used, even if you're paying the bill off every month, because this score is a snapshot in time. So you may pay it off tomorrow, but if they calculate your score or pull your score today, then it's going to look like you're using a high capacity. So in this provision, when they start reducing credit limits and closing accounts, this will impact credit scores. 15% of your score is based on your credit history or length of your credit history. So how long have you had those credit card accounts? I told you one of your options was to close your account and to pay it off based on the old terms. Well, closing your account will reduce your length of credit history going forward, and that will lower your score for a time. 10% of your score is based on the credit that you're using. FICO likes to see that you use a variety of credit. You have car loans, mortgages, credit cards, consumer credit. They like to see you're using a variety. Now, does that mean you should all rush out and get a variety of credit? Absolutely not. But it just happens over time that you use a variety of things. The last part is your past credit applications. 10% of your score is based on how many recent credit applications you've had. Now, I don't know about y'all, but every time I check out at Target, they say, would you like to save 10% today? Well, yes, I would, but I don't want to do it if it means I have to open a credit card account, because that's going to lower my credit score. So always be aware of how your score is impacted based on that. I see we're running short of time. I'm a talker, so I'm going to cruise on through. And let's move on to course development. FINRA provides modules for their courses, and that's what we based our course on. But we also did our own research and found out what the specifics of our population was going to be. What were their needs? And we based the course around that. In many cases, we went back to the basics. How do you do a budget? How do you determine the best checking and savings account for yourself? How do you look at banking alternatives such as title lenders, pawn shops, rent-to-own programs? So we used both of those components in order to develop our modules. Our Money Matters Advisory Board was very important in how we determined our classes. Many of them have worked with this population, and they gave us great hints on the different things that we needed to cover. In our GED Pilot Program, once our program was written, we really felt like we needed to test it out somewhere to make sure that the program worked. And we were able to go into one of the GED programs and actually present our program. Now, we found many benefits when we went into their location. One of the benefits was that we had no transportation cost. Originally, we had planned to have people come to the library to take our classes. But with this population, transportation is always an issue and the need for child care. So by offering the classes where the students were, that was just a big benefit to us because the students were there, they didn't have to make a special trip, and we didn't have to provide transportation or child care. Some other unforeseen benefits were that they were in a comfortable location. They knew each other, so they were really willing to open up and talk about their situations. Frankly, I've never been in any kind of financial course where people were so willing to share the things that they've done well, but things that they haven't done well. And I found out that in sharing, you got a lot of credibility with this population. I was able to share things that I had done wrong in the past, and we were all able to not only just get information in this class, but really take it to heart and be able to turn around and use this information. Another thing was the makeup of our GED class. I was very surprised by the age of our students. When I think GED classes, I think those students who've dropped out of high school, students who've been out of high school for a few years. But what we found was that over 41% of our population in these GED classes was 36 years old or older. In many cases, people had started working right out of whenever they left school, and they had worked their way up through a company. And so they had really good paying jobs. Unfortunately, with the economy, many people have been laid off, and now they're re-entering the job market at 36 plus in age with no high school diploma. So they are making up a great deal of our GED population at this point, and they have been a significant asset to our classes. Let's talk about the collection. I know for many of you, this is a sore subject. We're out of money, and we're trying to figure out how are we going to provide the materials that we need to provide to our students. Well, since we are out here talking about financial literacy, we wanted to make sure that we provided not only the best information in our classes, but that our students and our patrons and our people in our community could come in and find the information that they were looking for. So, in our collection, we made sure that we had some very basic material that was in a format that was easy to understand. We made sure that we had some very specific type books and information for those people that were looking for how to deal with retirement, how to deal with mortgages, should I refinance, how do I pay for college, how have the rules changed. We also have a fair number of sophisticated investors, and so we had to make sure our collection had different books that would provide the information they were looking for. And another great benefit of our grant was that we were able to have the Value Line and Learning Express databases made available. It's important when you're building your collection from financial literacy that you don't leave out your young people and your children. It is so important as parents that we teach our children early about financial literacy. I don't know about y'all, my parents paid the bills. I assumed I didn't know what they did. It just happened. I would have really liked to have had more information and input from my parents going along so that by the time I got to college I was much more astute. I try to instill that in my own child, and I think it's real important to teach your children. So we've added to our collection some great series that are meant specifically for children and young adults, and it's also something that the parents can get involved with working with them. So, Money Matters webpage. This is a great link. It's right up there for you. All of the classes that I teach are listed there along with the PowerPoints. We've got some excellent internet links, so if you're wondering about how can I pay off my credit, should I refinance my house, what is the best mortgage for me, there are some great calculators and links that can help you make those decisions. And another fun thing that we have is called Ask Teri. And there you see my caricature. You saw the real me in the beginning, but here I am. I laugh and tell Trudi I wish I could put that on my driver's license. But it's an Ask Teri, and you can send in questions to me and ask different things that are on your mind about financial literacy. So we get some fun questions submitted through that. So here's a breakdown of our classes. Trudi went over our Money Matters classes. Those are our 6 one-hour classes. They do provide the opportunity to get a GED scholarship, and they're also offered at our GED program locations. In addition, we offer community classes. When we first started this grant, we weren't really sure how we were going to go about offering those community classes, so we went to UGA. We used the resources they had available. We used their law school and their College of Family and Consumer Science, along with the Athens Land Trust, to provide the classes to the community. But over time, we felt like we had something to offer, and we began offering our own classes. To date, we've offered 10 different community classes in the library. Some of the subject matter includes managing your credit score, which is our most offered class and the one that's most often attended. We have basics in investing as well as more detailed investing. And the next class that we're going to be offering is a Money Matters class for engaged and newly married couples. I found it was really interesting how often that was the question that came up. We had people come into our classes that were about to get married. I had Ask Teri questions from parents. How can I help my child that's about to get married? So we're going to offer a class specifically in that area. And we've also been to civic clubs, Kiwanis, and different investment groups. Something that we found that was really important with our community classes is if we can do a very specific type community class, then we really feel like the people walk away with useful information that they're going to in turn use to better their lives, as opposed to some more general type classes. And I hope that the little bit I talked about today, as far as the new credit card law, I hope that that's a takeaway that you will all have, that you'll be able to make your life better. Frankly, I believe I teach this class to teach myself. So what are our outcomes? One of the benefits of teaching these classes has been the fact that I stay in the same locations and I'm able to see my former students. So when they end the class, many of them say, "Oh, Miss Hanna, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that." And I often wonder, do they really do it? Well, what we found is that they come back to me weeks or months later and they say, "Let me tell you what I've done." And so I just want to give you one or two testimonies about our classes. And the one that I think is really one of the most interesting is we had an older student. She was in her 50s. She had a credit score of over 800. And when she left her job, she took some retirement money and bought her husband a truck. Well, number one, we know we don't take money out of our retirement account before we're 59 and a half, but she had already done that. But something we could help her with was the fact that she had used the dealer rate when she purchased the truck, and they had offered her an 8.9% rate. Now here she has an 800 credit score. But she learned in our class that she could refinance that, and she went out on her own and did her research and was able to change that to a 2.9%. So that was an excellent result of our classes. Another one that I think is important is how many of the students now feel confident in discussing their financial matters with their husbands and with their children, and able to share with them and make their lives better. We deal with a lot of people. One of our classes deals with women who are in abusive situations, and those women really benefit from being able to learn how to manage money, and it will help them get out of some of those negative situations. How sustainable is this program? Well, we've established that there is an ongoing need for the program. Our evaluations have shown us that we are meeting the needs of our community. We've looked at the cost of the program going forward, and the largest cost is really me, and the copying cost and some of the advertising. So we feel like that it's doable to do some fundraising in order to raise the money to continue the program. And that's how we're looking at funding the program going forward. So, how will this program apply to you? Can this translate to your organization? I think Trudi did an excellent job today going through what our library did in order to determine what our needs were and what the niche was for our program. So we encourage you all to do the same thing. Do your homework. Look at your own community. What is the need you have there? Start small. Start with a class or two. Even take the information we have available on our website and use it at your library or your organization and offer some classes. Don't overlook those partners in your community, such as your credit union and your local classes. In many cases, they're looking for the opportunity to present their programs. I know credit unions especially are out there trying to partner. And another thing is, and I know you're doing it already, look for those grant opportunities. FINRA's out there, but there are many other grant opportunities available. So that's the end of the presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
I've actually saved a few questions from a bit earlier that I will both paste into the chat window, and I will go ahead and read them. One is from Lynn. The first is from Lynn. It says, regarding credit, cards are not the only point. What about medical bills? How does non-payment of a contested bill affect credit? Are the credit card payments and medical billings merged on credit scores? I'm going to go ahead and paste that too since it's a little bit long.
Okay. That is an excellent question. And I often tell my students, the first place it's going to take you to court and send you to a collection agency are hospitals and medical bills. So never let those sit around without being on top of them. The problem with medical bills is most of us have a procedure done, and then there's a time lapse between when the procedure's done, when the insurance pays. And so we're all kind of waiting to see how much the insurance pays before we actually start making our payment. So I'll tell you, stay on top of that because you can quickly get 60 and 90 days behind, and they will turn you over to a collection agency. And yes, once it goes to that collection agency, it is on your credit report and it will affect your credit. But the flip side of that is hospitals are wonderful about working with you for the most part. If you go in and tell them, listen, there's no way I can pay this bill, what can I do? Set up a payment plan, and most times they won't charge you interest. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you very much. The second question is from Brenda, and she says, how does a lien affect you after your credit? I'm sorry, let me go back a second. How does a lien affect your credit even after you've already paid it?
Once it's paid, any negative information that's on your credit report, and a lien being one of them, would stay on your credit report for 7 years. And the further you get away from any negative information on your credit report, the less it affects you. So let's say you just paid it off and you were going out to get a mortgage. Well, if it just happened, then that's going to affect you mostly. If you're 2 or 3 years down the road, that's not going to be as big an issue.
Okay, and Maria B. has asked if you're willing to share your collection titles.
Yes, we can do that. Talking about sharing the collection titles, so we can put out there what we have done. And certainly we haven't finished purchasing, but we've got some other ideas, so we'll be glad to pass that along.
This is Pat Carterette, and it is 11 o'clock. We do have some unanswered questions, Teri, and we're wondering how might these people that have questions get them answered? How would you suggest?
I think going to the Ask Teri on our website would be a great way to do that. We've shown the link today to our website. Just go on to Ask Teri, and I'll be glad to answer those questions for you.
Okay, I think that would be a good solution to that. And we will be sending everyone an email today, later on today, that has all the URLs that you've seen in the transcript area, as well as a link to the archive session, a link to getting a certificate for attendance, and there will be also a link to a short questionnaire evaluation of today's session. So, boy, Teri and Trudi, this has been great. You've given us so much to think about for ourselves, not only for ourselves, but also for possible programs in our library that would really fill a great need. And I really like the fact that you tied this into the IMLS, the 21st century competencies, too, that financial literacy is one of those competencies now that people need to have to be successful in today's world. So I want to thank you both so much, and thank you all for coming. And anyone is welcome to stay on for our next presentation, which starts at 11:15, and is Karen Minton from Galileo, who will be talking about the Digital Library of Georgia and local history sources. And don't feel that you have to live just in Georgia to get anything out of Karen's session, because a lot of the information she's going to be talking about today is available, readily available to anybody. Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Good morning.